Welcome to the KEISER-Report. I'm Max Keiser. You know, Frederick Bastiat once said, when plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men living together in society, they create for themselves, in the course of time, a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. I'd like to add that they also create a financial system that profits from it. Stacy Herbert.
Yes, Max Keiser. This is our show today is about the financial system that helps the plunderers profit. But first, I want to say we have the likes of the KEISER-Report and this image, Mad Max. They killed the market. Now he's going to run them over.
Yeah, of course. That's right. Get out of my way! Just run them over.
This is why we do the show, because the markets have been set up and engineered to help a small group of people that plunder the system. Timothy Geithner accused of alerting banks to 2007 interest rate cut for second time. In the summer of 2007, as storm clouds gathered over the world's financial system, then New York Federal Reserve President Timothy Geithner allegedly informed the Bank of America and other banks about the possibility that the U.S. central bank would lower one of its critical interest rates, according to a senior Fed official. Max, that senior Fed official is Jeffrey Lacker, the head of the Richmond Fed, and he originally raised the allegation during a Fed conference call on August 16th, 2007. And remember the lead up to August 16th, 2007 very well, of course. People were beginning to worry that the whole financial system would fall apart. Now, in this conference call at 6 p.m. on Thursday, August 16th, 2007, Jeffrey Lacker said, "If I could just follow up on that, Mr. Chairman." Chairman Bernanke says, "Yes, go ahead, Mr. Lacker." Vice Chairman Geithner, did you say that you are unaware of what we're considering or what we might be doing with the discount rate? Vice Chairman Geithner answered, "Yes." Mr. Lacker, Vice Chairman Geithner, I spoke with Ken Lewis, President and CEO of Bank of America, this afternoon, and he said that he appreciated what Tim Geithner was arranging by way of changes in the discount facility. So my information is different from that.
Geithner was trafficking in inside information. And to give you an idea of how you can profit from this, you can buy an out-of-the-money option for 10 cents. And then when the news hits the wire, that option is worth 20 or 30 bucks. So you make instant $10 million on an investment of $20,000. And Geithner knows this, and he's peddling on inside information. He justifies it in his own mind by suggesting that he's making a market or adding liquidity. Those are code words that he uses to hypnotize himself, to absolve himself from the heinous crime of undermining the American and global economy and committing acts of financial terrorism. Why this guy isn't in a straitjacket being beaten to death at this very moment, I have no idea.
So this document has come out because of Freedom of Information request, and it's 5 years. The Fed often publishes their stuff 5 years later. So this is 5 years later now. And Lacker, he was contacted by all sorts of media, and he confirmed that, yes, this is what I heard. And he said, quote, "I was aware of these discussions among a few large banks about borrowing from their discount windows to support the asset-backed commercial paper market. My understanding was that New York Fed President Timothy Geithner had discussed a reduction in the discount rate with these banks in connection with these initiatives." So again, the lead up to this August 16th, 6 p.m. 2007 conference, the markets had been tumbling. Many people were short, so the options on the other side would have been very cheap,
right? Because
everybody was short, including our friend Carl Denninger. We'll get to him because he lost $30,000 on this move. Now, at the time, however, so they would have made a huge profit on having inside information about something that was going to be done that nobody else in the market was anticipating. Remember, interest rates had not been cut for over a year at that point.
Well, add to the list of people on this first call basis from Geithner would be, of course, Warren Buffett, who is a big holder of bank stocks and is a guy people call from the government when they are making these types of moves. So here you have a publicly listed company, Berkshire Hathaway, run by Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and they're engaged in insider trading. And as a result, they're undermining the integrity of the economy, and people are dying, people are suffering.
Again, so the markets you could read the markets. You could see when the insider trading happens, and we've talked about this all the time in KEISER-Report. We often note suspicious activity. There was suspicious behavior in the markets on LIBOR, and many people in the blogosphere, many commentators for years had said that the LIBOR rates were clearly being rigged. Well, at the time, presenting the S&P 500's 50-point surge courtesy of the illegal Geithner leak. Now, this is from Zero Hedge, and I want to just make note of this fact that they say illegal Geithner link, because Reuters on this very leak says, quote, private disclosure of confidential market-sensitive information by the central bank would be highly unusual, but it was not immediately clear it would be illegal. Again, going back to that Bastiat quote, Max, a legal system that authorizes it. These guys, the plunderers, create a legal system that authorizes their plunder.
Right, and you go back to John Locke in 1790 when he said, when the social contract is broken, the people must revolt. Who determines whether or not the social contract is broken? It's not the people who are engineered the break in the social contract, like Geithner and Buffett. It's for the people to decide whether or not they determine the social contract has been broken, because it's the people who must revolt. And here you have a situation where they claim they haven't broken any laws because they changed the laws to favor this massive larceny and law breaking. Therefore, you have to look at it in the context of, is the social contract broken? Are these people who are there to represent us, are they now at risk of being overthrown? And in any definition of democracy, the answer would be unequivocally yes.
Well, let's look back at this day. So August 16th, 6 p.m., it's a Thursday. This is when Geithner was in this meeting with Lacker and Ben Bernanke discussing the forthcoming reduction in the discount rate. This is the rate that only banks get at the discount window when they have to go to the Fed to borrow money in a crisis situation of liquidity. So let's look at the charts of the S&P 500 that day. You see that here? And what Zero Hedge says is what happened on August 15th and continued through the 16th was an aggressive bout of selling that took the S&P from 1390 down to 1360 at the close of the prior trading day, and subsequently sent it lower by another 30 points to 1330 at just about 2 p.m. Eastern Time. What happened next would have otherwise remained a mystery if not for the declassification of the Fed's 2007 transcripts, because suddenly, out of nowhere, an unprecedented bout of buying started with no news to serve as a catalyst. The buying sent the S&P soaring by some 50 points in the span of an hour. So that was 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, August 16th. At 6 p.m. Eastern Time, August 16th, Jeffrey Lacker was telling Tim Geithner, I've heard that you told these bankers that you're going to cut the discount rate. He said, no, I didn't say anything. It wasn't me.
Right. Well, to give you an idea of how to profit from this, as a broker, the way I would have played it, and had done this myself many times, is that you buy an SPX futures contract option, and you buy thousands of them for 10 or 20 cents, and then you don't give the account number. When the news comes out, if the news is as you heard it should be from the insider sources, you keep the trade yourself. You make $10, $20 million. If the news is incorrect, then you give the account number for a pension account somewhere, the teachers union, the firemen's union, and you bury it in that pension account, and you, of course, bribe the compliance officer, and you bribe the sales manager, and in the case of Payne Weber, you'd have to bribe actually the CEO at some point to cover the tracks of all of this, what's called look-back trading. So it's no-lose trading. It's insider information. Geithner is a wealthy man because he's a fascist pig, and he works for fascist pigs, run out of a big giant house in Washington full of fascist pigs.
So the next day, Friday, August 17th, 2007, at 8 a.m., they announced that they're cutting the discount rate. It shocked the markets. They did it before trading. Here is Flip Out Friday from market ticker's Carl Denninger. He was short the market because it was due a massive fall, as we know. Despite all of their intervention, despite all of their insider trading, the markets did crash mightily over the next 18 months. Well, he lost $30,000, and he goes over, there are only two possible explanations. One, there are one or more banks that are literally about to suck water. Remember, he's writing this live during 2007 before all the banks did suck water. Two, the Fed lied outright to Wall Street and to the public and intended to do this all along, knowing full well that the statement Poole made on the matter was false. He's referring to the St. Louis Fed President William Poole, who had only said a few days before this move by Timothy Geithner and Ben Bernanke to cut the discount rate. He had publicly said to the media, to therefore the investing population, that he saw no reason for the Fed to cut rates. So, of course, at the time, Carl Denninger was caught out, but he's thinking that all of Wall Street is cut out because, of course, he didn't even suspect that they were actually rigging the game for Tim Geithner's buddies.
Right. Well, Carl Denninger is a keen observer of the markets, and he digs down deep into the architecture of the options market and the Fed funds rates, and he can see quite clearly through volume what's going on, who's doing what, and he's an informed, sophisticated trader. And the fact that someone like this would be bamboozled by insider trading by Geithner, of course, it evokes a response of disgust and horror, because it's not just about a guy trading on inside information. It's about the Secretary of the Treasury throwing the country under the bus and then urinating on it like some U.S. soldier on a Taliban.
Well, yeah, and at the time, Timothy Geithner was the president of the New York Fed, so he was the one responsible for regulating these banks, not facilitating their crime wave. And he went on to say, and by the way, the rally yesterday, i.e. the one we just showed in the chart, I'm forced to be suspicious of it being ignited by a leak, short covering in the financials. I'm not so sure anymore. Maybe more like someone being tipped off.
Right. Well, when the phrase market making is used by Lloyd Blankfein or J.P. Morgan, and we saw this with the London whale loss in London, J.P. Morgan puts on thousands of trades, and the ones that are profitable, they cherry pick and they stick it in their account. The ones that are losers, they put in the government account, they put in a pension account, they put in some poor schlub customer account. And this goes on without any interruption until such time as there's a bit of a mix-up and they have to declare some kind of a loss. But this is what Carl Denninger is observing. He's saying that there are thousands of trades out there. They're all bogus. They're all being put on by insiders who have no risk at all in any of these transactions. They simply cherry-pick the ones that are winners. They put all the losers into the public's pocket, and they never get charged. And as Bastiat said, it's looting has become the de facto method of governance. In the UK, it's the same thing. Cameron is a looter. He's a looter. That's the way that they pension accounts are being looted. The economy is being looted. And then they try to pass that off as an acceptable form of government. Well, Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the KEISER-Report.
Thank you, Max.
Stay tuned for the second half. I'll be speaking with Stephen A. Ramirez, former enforcement officer with the SEC.
Welcome to the future.
Out of sight, but still on our minds.
Radiation from the stone exceeds the norm.
Let's try to live smarter with smartphones. You never know what some people are hiding, and can't be sure till you probe down to the molecular level. Learn that what the doctor ordered is often based on secrets under our skin. Let us shine the light on a hidden world.
Technology update. We've got the future covered.
Download the official RT application to your cell phone, choose your language, stream quality, and enjoy your favorites from RT.
If you're away from your television, well, it just doesn't matter. Now with your mobile device, you can watch RT anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Stephen A. Ramirez. He's professor at Loyola School of Law and author of Lawless Capitalism. Professor Ramirez was previously at the Resolution Trust Corporation and also an enforcement attorney with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Professor, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's start with MF Global. One of the most audacious crimes in the finance sector last year. John Corzine is, of course, ex-Goldman Sachs, ex-governor of New Jersey, and a big fundraiser for Obama. Did he get away with a crime? And if so, which crime or crimes, Professor?
Well, as I often tell my students, Max, the only way to know for sure if someone's guilty of a crime is to take it to a jury and wait for a verdict and see what the jury says in terms of whether or not there's evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. But subject to that, yes, it certainly looks like someone got away with the crime. When I was at the Securities and Exchange Commission, we, as part of our enforcement program, monitored broker-dealers, and one of the fundamental things we tried to achieve was to make sure that broker-dealers never rated customer accounts for speculative trading purposes. So that should never happen. The fact that it happened is bad enough, but worse yet is the fact that a politically connected, very powerful individual completely escapes prosecution, as does everyone associated with his firm. That does not pass the smell test. There is something woefully wrong with our system of criminal justice when MF Global can happen right before the world's eyes and money can disappear from customer accounts and no one faces any criminal accountability whatsoever. That's an outrage.
Right. Well, going back to the Resolution Trust Corporation and the crimes of the savings and loan crisis, the response by the industry after that scandal of the 80s, early 80s, was to change the law to make it easier to commit massive fraud. So instead of trying to curb abusive behavior, the lobbyists for Wall Street were allowed to change the laws to make it easier to commit abusive behavior, and the abuses have gotten much bigger, much more leverage, much more fallout, bigger bailouts, and destruction of the economy. Let me ask you this, Professor, being a well-rounded intellectual, if we go back to 1790, in the words of John Locke, when the social contract is broken, the people must result. If we have bankers writing the laws to give them the ability to commit, and I'll call it, John Corzine committed massive fraud and massive criminality, when you let this happen, hasn't the social contract itself be broken? Your thoughts, Professor?
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, Max. I would even take it a step further. It's not just the social contract in the United States that is at stake here. It is capitalism itself, and it's capitalism on a global scale. And so, yes, I agree with Locke that once the social contract is revoked the way that it has been in the United States over the last 3 or 4 decades, that's a huge problem. But a bigger problem than that is we currently have a global economy where a small cadre of individuals who control vast wealth are now above the law. They own the law, they can change the law, they dominate the law. That's a scary reality. And if I'm correct on that thesis, then we can expect huge economic costs for the 99.9% of us who do not enjoy criminal immunity and don't have a lobbyist on our speed dial.
Well, to demonstrate how preposterous this financial terrorism and co-option of the rule of law by banksters has become, Lanny Breuer said they wouldn't be pursuing charges against HSBC for laundering money for drug cartels and terrorists in Saudi Arabia because to do so could destabilize the global financial system. Your thoughts, Professor?
Well, I don't think that passes the laugh test. I think that's utter hogwash. If you want to destabilize the global financial system, as we learned in 2008, allow a small band of financial elites to completely dominate law, to be above the law, and you'll get plenty of financial instability. If you want a stable financial system, you need the rule of law. Investors need to have confidence that when they make investment decisions, it's backed by legal and regulatory frameworks that see to it that their investment decisions are not plundered and that their investment money is not built.
All right, well, Professor, let's take a look back over the past 10, 15 years to see how we got here. You know, it's important to understand the players and the timeline. Barack Obama is replacing Tim Geithner with Jack Lew, who is a known terrorist. who has been involved in architecting the system in favor of criminal activity, accounting fraud, securities fraud. Let's talk about the history of this. Was getting rid of Glass-Steagall under Clinton, or introducing the Commodity Futures Modernization Act under Clinton, or Alan Greenspan saying the markets would regulate fraud, in other words, letting the markets go without any regulation at all? Are any of these the most important historical references we can make? What's your favorite moment of the past 20 years when we can identify as when the terrorists took over the Wall Street? Your thoughts, Professor?
Well, I think it was a slow and gradual process. It wasn't necessarily sudden, and there wasn't necessarily an announcement in the New York Times like there was with respect to the death of criminal immunity, criminal accountability in the financial sector in connection with the HSBC case. But I think you've hit the big ones. When we allowed the financial sector to become so large that they have the entire economy over a barrel and they can extort our government officials to get all kinds of goodies and bailouts not available to other economic actors, that was a gigantic step. When we allowed them, you did a great show yesterday on derivative trading, when we allowed these giant, too-big-to-fail banks with the backing of the United States government to enter into all these gambling transactions in the derivatives market, over-the-counter derivatives markets, I think we were asking for trouble, and we got it, because they became too big and too interconnected to allow our policy elite and our politicians to even consider the possibility that letting them go into bankruptcy is an option. And so after September 15th, 2008, as a direct result of the derivatives deregulation initiatives that you've identified and Glass-Steagall, we had, at least it was perceived, that we had little choice but to bankroll these giant banks to the tunes of tens of trillions of dollars to keep them afloat. I also think that the deregulation of the mortgage market, the lack of enforcement against predatory mortgages, these are my sort of top candidates in a rogues gallery of legal indulgences for elite concentrated power.
Now, Professor, we see in America the beginnings of a civil war. On one hand are the people wielding weapons of mass financial destruction, as Warren Buffett called them. And on the other side, we have people who are clamoring to maintain their gun rights because they want protection against the banksters. The Obama administration is telling the people who want the guns to protect themselves against Wall Street that they have to turn in their guns, but he's doing nothing to shut down the terrorists, the weapons of mass financial destruction that's going on Wall Street and the banksters in coordination with banksters here in the City of London and around the world. So as this civil war takes shape, and make no mistake about it, with 100 million Americans now at or below the poverty line, and people understanding that the reason they got there is because of Barack Obama and previous administrations' friendly ties to banking terrorism in New York and the City of London, we're at a point of a civil war. How close do you think before outright the shooting begins? How do you see this shaping up?
Well, if I'm right that basically our legal system has been taken over by a small cadre of financial elites, you would expect more economic pain. And as the economic pain increases and as economic crises as a result of criminality at the apex of our economy become more common, people are going to take vigorous action. I would suggest to you, Max, that any kind of street fight is not likely to succeed, because even with the most potent arms that you can imagine in the hands of individual citizens, it's no match for drones and M1 tanks and the United States military and even the National Guard. So I would suggest that people use the political system and the legal system to take back our economy, and that we hold these people accountable pursuant to law rather than any kind of violence. I don't think, frankly, that all the talk about using guns to take on Wall Street is likely to even faze these folks in the slightest, because I think they understand that as long as they dominate the United States government, they dominate the United States military, and no one's going to beat the United States military in any kind of pitched battle whatsoever. So consequently, I would urge that people sort of let go of the gun issue and think about instead ways that we can challenge power at the polls. You know, there are still ways, I think, to support candidates who are very serious about holding financial elites accountable and quelling the power that financial institutions have appropriated on Wall Street. I think it's still doable politically and through our legal system, in other words.
Now, Professor, there is another alternative, and that is to maybe follow in the footsteps of what Germany is doing. Germany quite clearly has completely lost confidence in what America is doing to stamp out the fraud on Wall Street. So they're taking delivery of their gold, their physical gold, from New York, from France. This is following in the footsteps of bankers around the world now, abandoning the dollar and going to gold and silver as a currency that they can trust, that's not completely co-opted and destroyed by what we're seeing on Wall Street. What about the individual? Does the individual make sense for them to start buying silver, perhaps, some gold, to protect themselves against what's obviously coming, a bond collapse, a paper money fiat collapse, and total economic and political chaos? Your thoughts?
Well, I think as an individual, we should keep in mind that to the extent our economy suffers more and more under the kind of lawlessness that I've identified, we do need to take steps to protect ourselves. Unfortunately, those steps to protect ourselves are themselves economically pernicious, economically dangerous, because as people lose trust in the system and withdraw capital from the system, the more and more legitimate business will suffer. And so I hesitate to advise people or to counsel people to lose complete trust in the system just yet. I think we got to fight for capitalism. I think we got to fight for capitalism in the halls of Washington. We got to fight for capitalism in the media. We've got to write op-eds. We've got to do things like listen to your show, which I think has done a wonderful job of articulating the threats and telling other people about the dangers posed to our capitalistic system. I personally believe that capitalism is worth fighting for politically and through our legal system, and that's where we're going to win.
Fair enough. All right, Professor, that's all the time we have. Thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you for having me, Max.
Okay, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Professor Stephen A. Ramirez. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.